At MIT, they're looking at sinking a tokamak into salt water and using the water as your tokamak wall. So the water will be heated, and salt water is quite good at absorbing neutrons. And that's very interesting work, but still, that's a swimming pool in your reactor, which is it's interesting, but still it doesn't mean you can reduce the size that much. In fact, it almost makes it... well, either way, you're going to have a lot of water. There is an advantage to this in the fact that if we wrap the walls of the reactor with lithium-6 plus a neutron, which we have here, will create, again, an alpha particle. No, when it will create, tritium and an alpha particle. So helium-4. So you actually can breed your own tritium. Because this is effectively a neutron source, you can use your neutrons to bombard lithium-6 and create more tritium. So it can almost produce its own fuel, which is a big positive. And again, for a power station, that's a big advantage. But it is still, this is a power station-only device. If everyone follows that, you've got a massive donut with a meter wall around it, and you've got to have a steam turbine, and you've got to be breeding your own tritium. So this is not going to be something that is going to be in a ship or a plane, even though you see people like Lockheed Martin releasing press releases about how they've developed a fusion reactor that's going to go on an aircraft. This is not going to be small, even after the modern supercomputer simulations and all the brilliant work done by university students. It just can't be much smaller. Is everyone reasonably happy with that? Is there any blinding questions that anyone wants to ask at this point that I've said which is totally false, or that you would like people to feel is a real stop before moving on? Okay, fine. So there's potentially another route we can go after this. Once ITER turns on and people start saying, okay, we now need to start investing in fusion, and how can we bring this forward, and funds start going, oh, apparently we should start being involved in fusion. There is another reaction that is very interesting, which is helium-3 plus deuterium, which will create helium-4 plus a proton, and 18.3 MeV. So the interesting thing about this is you are now, instead of having neutrons from your plasma, you've got protons, which is a charged particle. Protons we can control, and not only that, that is charge. So suddenly, if you can do this reaction, which is a little hard, the conditions required are more than DT, but not a lot more. It's easier than DD fusion, which is happening in deuterium-deuterium fusion, which is happening in stars. But it's a little harder than this. That's very different, because suddenly you don't need these massive walls to absorb your neutrons. You've got charge coming straight out of your plasma. You're going to have the occasional DD fusion, because there is still deuterium, and deuterium will fuse with deuterium, giving you a neutron and some tritium. But you've got, essentially, protons coming out of your plasma rather than neutrons, which is pretty exciting if you want to reduce the size of these things. And because there'll be no neutron decay and emission in your reactor walls, you will increase the length of the life of your reactor, which means you decrease the price of having a tokamak. Now, right now, everybody is focused on DT, and quite rightly, because it is probably our best chance of creating a fusion burn, and that's what ITER is all rigged up for. But that is a very serious reaction that physicists at Cullum and at Princeton, MIT know may just be what investors go for, because investors don't necessarily want to listen to the science too much. They make their mind up well before the physicist. The physicist goes, okay, but, and they go, no, I'm already in. I'm 100%, it's going to make it cheaper, it's going to make it smaller. So I believe there will be an enormous amount of funding going into helium-3. Problem is, helium-3 does not occur naturally on Earth. It's an isotope of helium that we don't have. It could be potentially bred inside a fusion reactor. I met a company called Helium One recently, who are based in Tanzania, who think they might be able to extract it from the ground by filtering it through graphene. I'm not sure how that is working out for them, but you know, helium-3 would be the ideal fuel for these reactors. In fact, it has a valuation of about $3 billion per ton at the moment. And we have it on the moon. The moon is outside of the Van Allen belts that surround our Earth and is being bombarded by solar winds all day, and the soil of the moon is rich with helium-3. And the Chinese are apparently looking at mining the moon for nuclear reactor fuel, which makes a very good story. But you know, there is enough helium-3 on the moon. I mean, 1 ton would power the United States for a year. So that's why it's got its valuation. And it would, inside a reactor like this, helium-3 is maybe the end game of fusion. But again, we haven't even got, I mean, I'm talking about something which might be the end game of fusion. We have yet to see a reactor like this being built. But if you look at ITER, if I quickly go back a few slides, and I say this is many cement mixers and trucks and cranes, this is not a science project anymore. This is not scientists going, ooh, let's just get our equations out and see if we can mix this. Now, this is something that has already been agreed. We know how to do it. We know how to build it. We know it will work. And we've known this since 2008. So this is a construction project, not a science project, which is a little, I mean, as grateful as I am that we're doing ITER, and as grateful I am that people are funding it, this is a project where the know-how is sort of long gone. We know how to do fusion, and we're taking a hell of a long time proving it. So this is probably why companies like mine, I can tell you definitely why companies like mine, but are looking and saying, well, if the science is proven out, why don't we start working on it now while it raises eyebrows? You know, once ITER turns on, everyone goes, look, fusion's brilliant, then it's too late to set up a fusion company, because people say, well, everyone knows fusion's a good idea, and you know, you have to do it now where people go, still, what, fusion, is that not a bit lightsabery, a bit weird? That's when you have to start getting invested, because this technology is real, it's proven out, we know how to do fusion, and we know it doesn't need to be this big. So when ITER turns on, companies will put their hand up and say, well, actually, we've been doing this for 10 years. Maybe we haven't got a reactor the size of this room that's churning out the same result as ITER, but we've shown competence in it so that we are now able to receive much larger investment, because it's got to be smaller than that no matter what, and that will work. So what are we doing? This is one of the approaches that companies are looking at. The conventional Tokamak, you can see your electromagnetic coils and your central solenoid and your plasma in the middle. That is the sort of original model. And this is a spherical Tokamak, where instead of having your magnets looped all the way around, you have them all coming through a central core. It's more like a cored apple. And as you can see, changing the shape may improve plasma stability, as we're talking about the fact that turbulence, several other problems like diffusion, are stopping our reaction. And so this device theoretically has shown promise. I think I know of one company that is building a device like this, but only one. You'd think that these devices should be being built and prototyped like any other device. You know, nothing works first time. You know, you build it, it doesn't quite work, you bin it, you build another one. But what's happening is scientists are going to investors and saying, hey, we think we can make this work, raising a huge amount of money, building a first prototype, and having every problem that first prototypes always do have, and going back to funders and saying, guess what, we've burnt X much million pounds, and we've achieved Q equals this. And the investors saying, well, go away, because I wanted you to solve the world energy, which is, you know, solve the world energy crisis, what you said you'd do. So unfortunately, we live in a world where being a plasma physicist is no excuse for poor business. These brilliant, gifted scientists are too close. They are speaking a different language to investors. and they are ending up being diluted and diluted and diluted to the point where the physicist is owning single digits of the company he founded before they've even fused anything. And this type of R&D needs to be done. We need to see what happens when we build a device that shape and turn it on, and just run it, and then probably bin it. But in a normal R&D development, I would say, hey, look, I'm going to build a product. It's going to have my first prototype, my second prototype, my third prototype, and I want you to fund the whole lot. Very reasonable. The investor says, okay, fine. With this, they're saying, look, that's going to be, we're going to put all our money, we're going to raise money from my aunt, my friends, we're going to put all the money together, we're going to build one device, we're going to turn it on, we're going to talk about the brilliant sort of behavior in plasma that we've seen from it in our computers, and then we're going to try and raise more money. So on top of the fact that the internet, if you Google fusion, you'll come across what we saw in the beginning, Fleischmann and Pons and cold fusion and fission, and will it ever happen? You've got scientists setting up business ventures, funding them like a 16-year-old's first app business. And that's very seriously what's happening. Here are the companies currently doing this, one of which is mine. That share price has nothing to do with them. But there's not very many. These are the companies that have decided to, they said that, look, ITER is pretty significant. It's going to turn on quite soon. We should be building this technology today. And the sort of money they're raising is, what, 150 million, 5 million, 13 million. I mean, in all reality, I've raised more than that for businesses when I was 20. That's a shame, but a reality. I think one of the problems is that investors have got a mental view that when they see history do something, they imagine it will repeat itself, and that's why I put this chart here. Once you see a trend, it's very difficult to buy, because history has told you that that trend will continue. And this is something that traders experience, and of course we know that these trends do change. But fusion has got a track record and a reputation for failing. And investors are so used to hearing, okay, all this excitement, enthusiasm, and then you're going to come back to me and say, oh, we've hit Q equals something, and we're 1%, and we need a bit more millions, and we're just, And so investors are keeping their hands in their pockets, as you can see. There is a huge amount of money out there for what will be the most important innovation of this century, no doubt. But people are holding back. That is actually Tesla for the last month. Another bit of a problem, but it illustrates the point that people, once they get a picture in their head, it might take ITER to turn on before people go, okay, apparently this massive reactor has turned on, and now can we talk about fusion without getting shut down? Apparently now we can talk about fusion, and then that's when we'll have some. We've been doing it for 10 years, hopefully. There are some other devices around. So some people said, well, I've got an idea of how I can make fusion work. This is a magnetic mirror device, what we looked at earlier, trying to trap them in a linear-shaped fusion device. So is this. That's also a linear device. The advantage of a linear device, a straight fusion device, is that you don't have to worry about the particles moving out to the edges of your reactors. You can focus on keeping them nice and straight, the magnetic field lines nice and straight through your reactor. But, okay, so on the left, top left there, that's General Fusion's hammer, to hammer particles together. Top right is, I believe, Helion Energy's device. Again, it's like a magnetic mirror device with another hammer in the middle to really crush those particles together in the center. That is Trialpha, a company in the States, which has been very well funded. And you can sort of see it's a mixture of the two. And then we've got, this is Lockheed Martin's magnetic mirror device. But these devices have been funded, but really, we know tokamaks are going to work. We know they're going to work, otherwise we wouldn't be putting 13 billion into ITER. So right now we have one petrol engine. It's not perfect, and I'm sure I could build a petrol engine that was slightly, well, I probably could, but we could make a petrol engine that was slightly different, but it works. It's good enough. I'm sure, the V8 engine now and 10 years ago, it's better, but it's still not perfect. But the device works. These devices are, fusion will be made to work in many, many different devices, but will they be adopted by energy companies as a power station? And if you make a device like this work, or top left, you might get a Nobel Prize, but will it be adopted by BP? Tokamaks have been accepted as the chosen nuclear fusion device, not because they're perfect, but because we'll make them work, and they're simple enough to build, within a budget that suits, and they can be maintained by a power company. And actually, so much work has gone into this. This is at Culham. This is a project called RACE, which I recommend you guys visit. If you haven't all been to Culham, you've got probably the best talent pool for nuclear fusion in the world down the road. They have JET, the famous one from what I told you about at the beginning, from 1987. They also have a reactor called MAST, which is a Spheromac, the one like a cord apple. And they're using DT, so your neutron emissions, as I said, it's how they're handling them. They've actually got people who are trained to control robots that go inside the tokamak and can change the tiles from the walls without, they're so sensitive that they can even see the pushback of the screws, so they can feel it, so they don't strip the screw heads. And that's pretty advanced. There are guys today trained at how to change the walls of a tokamak. That is how much thought has gone into tokamaks as an energy source. So building a device that's different is, one potential. Yes, they're brilliant, and yes, they're very interesting projects, but in my view, tokamaks are what the government have decided to adopt, and that is what the world is going to want to put their money into when ITER turns on. Because people say, what is ITER? ITER is a tokamak. ITER works. Therefore, I'm going to put my money into a tokamak. So to build something that isn't a tokamak is a bit strange unless you know you're going to do it quickly and you know you're going to get the prizes, and then you're going to have to build out you're going to have to tell the governments, by the way, drop your 13 billion quid investment and use mine. And that might take another 20 years to even look at. There's also educational programs in tokamaks. So this is one that you can download on a mobile app that shows people how to confine, how to control your plasma. And it's a nice, neat educational tool because some of the younger students, they don't know about Chernobyl, and they aren't so, they don't think of nuclear as a nasty word. They just say, okay, fusion, why haven't we got it? Like, I'm not, they don't have a stigma that I think our generation do have. They think of nuclear as a nasty weapon and fusion as a fiction. So the two together are not great. And the good thing about ITER is they've got a lot of money to start educating the public about how these devices work. And so tokamaks have really been adopted. And that is what definitely my company and a few other companies are focusing on. What are the challenges? So why hasn't it worked? Here's the real crux. People say, okay, all brilliant, this is all massive, so why haven't we got fusion? What is the problem? Well, it's not that we just haven't cracked it. It's that there are going to be several innovations required until we get to the level where we can make them efficiently and achieve good results. So there are problems like the plasma starts interfering with the walls of the reactor and those walls come apart. The walls in JET were beryllium to start with, and beryllium is very good at absorbing particles, but the problem is when you run another plasma, those particles would pop out again, and you would then not know it was in your plasma. But out of that, scientists used to wash the tokamak by running aneutron plasmas like helium, before they would run their DT plasma to sort of wash the Tokamak walls, if you like. And out of that, they discovered that they could create a super shot, which is the highest temperatures that they had ever seen. So actually, by building these reactors, they stumbled across a result that theoretical physicists hadn't predicted. And that is so true. You can't just do everything on a white. You have to realize that by building a device that isn't perfect and turning it on, you will learn. That's just what happens throughout history. We know that that's the case. There are things like, this game is very good at illustrating, there are problems with the edge of the Tokamak, something called ELMS, which is edge localized mode, where neutrons or electrons will build up around the edge of the Tokamak and cause instabilities and therefore disrupt your plasma. There are ways of injecting deuterium pellets into the plasma to mitigate that. There are innovations like radiative cooling, where people inject argon into the plasma so that the plasma will ionize. Argon is very easy to ionize, and you'll get photons out, which will stop heat being transferred into the parts of the reactor you don't want. So little innovations that we've come up with, it's just making these reactors better and better and better. But the point of it is, ITER is going to turn on, ITER is going to work, and companies should be making their moves now so that they can show that they've got the technical know-how to treat and build and manage a tokamak and the construction of it. That is what the private sector is doing. Now, right now, fusion is about energy, because it's got to be, and that is what governments are quite rightly focusing on. But it may not just be about energy. Once you can create a star in a jar, and we're having, it'll mean that fission is like broadband, it's like dial-up to fiber optics. It's like it doesn't have a chance, because who would want to be creating energy when you've got this very heavy, weaponizable fission material versus very clean fusion material and much more energy? Energy is the principal thing, but there are so many spin-offs to this. It's not just about energy. There is potentially, apart from the spin-offs like the high vacuums and the advanced materials, how neutrons react with the walls. Currently people are looking at sintering mixtures of perhaps tungsten and beryllium and things to better withstand the neutron emission. There's lots of areas of investment there. But also, could fusion be used in rockets? Could fusion be used in defense? These are things that no one is really looking at, because yes, they're very theoretical, but investors you've got to be able to paint the picture to investors of what the future might be. Because if scientists are going to remain so quiet about fusion that they will not say a single thing because they don't want to be treated like Fleischmann and Pons and disgraced, then investors are just going to stay the hell away from it. Scientists have got to start capturing the imagination so that investors can see potentially where one day fusion could take us. If we are ever going to contemplate interstellar space travel, we need to get exhaust speeds a lot quicker than what we're doing with combustion engines, and ion thrusters and Hall effect thrusters are just not going to cut it. So is there going to be a place for fusion reactors in space? Well, if we're ever going to leave our solar system, there has got to be. But is anyone talking about that? No, because they don't want to get their fingers burnt in the media, or they don't want to get in trouble. But investors want to see that. You've got to capture the imagination with fusion and show people that, look, our generation is going to deal with this because it's happening right now. And when it does happen, the trend is going to change, and suddenly fusion will be here, and you're going to have to change your thinking. But, reason I wrote a book on it is if you are an investor who takes an interest in fusion because you thought you might have had the bug, this is the sort of book that you might find on Amazon now, which is £100, and it is a slog for even the theoretical physicist. And an investor who suddenly takes an interest on the train in fusion and says, apparently nuclear fusion is happening, they're going to buy this and they're going to bin it. Nobody has written books. This is the one that I've written, which is extremely small. You can read it in the bath. And it's a children's narrative to what fusion is, where we're going with it, how far, why we haven't got reactors at the moment, and when we possibly might. And you know what? A huge amount of people have picked it up, because if you want to then go ahead and study and specialize in something, you can. But right now, there is a real sort of sickness in the fact that it is being, all the optimism is being sort of held back by physicists who are very, very worried about history repeating itself and having more failures. But ITER is going to work. Fusion is going to be a very big thing in the next 15, 20 years. And I think you're going to see more and more companies getting involved in it. That is the book. And that's it.